Hi, this is Richard Fields with this week's Report from the Fields. There are lies, damned lies, and government statistics. The latter two, damned lies and government statistics, appear to be twins. Take the Bureau of Labor Statistics headline for job growth in January. 130,000 new jobs, with the unemployment rate dropping from 4.4% to 4.3%. That's the headline. The stock market rallied on the news. But the footnote was the BLS annual revision to last year's data. The initially reported job growth for 2025 was 584,000 new jobs. The footnote said the actual job number increase was 181,000. They were off by only 70% for the entire year. They're bad. Those of you with good memories of unpleasant news may recall that BLS Commissioner Erika McEntarfer was fired by Trump when the BLS announced a job increase that he thought was too low. Turns out it was probably too high. Keep in mind that the unemployment rate is material to the price to borrow money that the magicians at the Fed divine to be correct. Under their dual mandate of 2% inflation and full employment, higher unemployment calls for lower interest rates to stimulate the economy. They almost always get it wrong. They either keep interest rates too high for too long and cause a recession, or they keep interest rates too low for too long and create inflation. What's more is that the Fed's 2% inflation target is tragically detrimental to savings and the capital formation that savings make possible. It means that the dollar you put into your 401k in your 20s is reduced to less than 50 cents by the time you retire and need to spend it. Not to mention the fact that the Fed usually misses the 2% target by a lot, almost always on the high side. 3% inflation means that the dollar you saved for in your 20s is worth a quarter when you retire. And speaking of government statistics, it's not just the job growth numbers that Washington bureaucrats fiddle with and consistently get wrong. It's the reported inflation numbers. As real inflation has increased, the Washington number fiddlers have used so-called hedonics, or perceived product improvements, to manipulate the inflation rate downwards. For example, the iPhone, a supercomputer you can hold in your hand, is deemed rightfully better than the BlackBerry you and I used in the 1990s. Other adjustments to inflation used by the number manipulators include the substitution effect, which assumes that when the price of beef becomes too high, you switch from steak to hamburger. Economist John Williams of Shadowstats asserts that using CPI models used in the 1980s before the adjustments would result in inflation in the 8% to 12% range. The actual rate of real inflation is not that hard to figure out. It's the increase in the amount of money in the economy created by the Fed through quantitative easing and lower than market price interest rates price fixing. Assuming that the money stock goes up 5%, you'll have 5% inflation in either or consumer prices or asset values. That ratio can vary depending on the velocity of money or how quickly the money is spent after it's received. Typically, velocity goes up with higher inflation. People want to spend their money before the price of what they're buying goes up. The reason the Fed has been able to get by with its inflationary games is that a large part of the inflation it has caused has been in asset prices, stocks, bonds, and real estate. Nominal increases in the value of one's retirement account and house are perceived to be a good thing and mask the pain of the perpetual increase in the price of gasoline. That's what's been happening for the last 50 years. That game can only go on for so long. Eventually, housing becomes unaffordable for young families. Stock prices become priced far beyond the future cash flows and dividends they can produce. Increases in stock and bond prices and home values only benefit those who have them. That leads to an increasing disparity between the rich and the poor. When the middle class dwindles, the difference in wealth between the top 10% and the rest of us becomes impossible to explain away. We're there now. That's why socialism is becoming more popular among younger people in spite of its unblemished record of failure wherever it's been tried. People observe the unfair class divide. They want it remedied. There are only two ways to remedy that problem. One is to remove the cause of the problem, Fed-caused inflation. The other is for the poor to steal from the rich, either through taxation or through riots in the streets. One method leads to the preservation of civilization. The other leads to a war of all against all. The turning point is here. What method would you choose? That's this week's Report from the Fields. See you again next week.